Hello, and thank you for joining us. I have with me in the studio today Mrs. Gloria McField-Nixon. She's the Chief Officer for the portfolio of the Civil Service. So we're here to talk about how civil servants have been able to deliver or continue to deliver pretty much most of the services that we were delivering pre-coronavirus to the public. How's that all happening? How's it operating?
Oh, Donna, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. And I have to say this has been an incredibly busy time for our civil service. We knew going into the threat of the coronavirus that we were going to have to assemble ourselves differently. I don't think anyone appreciated just how quickly this change was going to come about. But across the civil service, without exception, men and women in our departments really stepped up and responded. And what we have seen has just been the seamless delivery of essential services, in many cases with departments actually facing higher caseloads than they had before we went into the pandemic. Examples of that would be our needs assessment unit, and the Premier has shared just the thousands of requests that they have processed in a very short time. And that's required men and women to be on the front line, meeting with persons and distributing much needed relief to individuals. We've had seamless continuation of garbage collection. Our men and women in uniform who have been meeting emergency flights at the airport for our CBC colleagues, individuals who continue to safeguard persons in our custody at detention facilities such as our prison officers, the 911 team that have just responded phenomenally throughout this crisis and have kept Cayman safe and responded to those answers. I have to give a huge shout out to our communications team. The demand for services for communications, as you know, has been through the roof. I mean, daily press briefings that have been taking place right now, the amount of communications that is happening online through social media, the work of our graphics team and really breaking down a lot of technical jargon and making that understandable for the public. And most importantly, not just being a conduit for giving information, but also being our conduit for understanding the questions that the public have during this crisis and allowing policymakers and technical persons to be able to provide those answers in ways that people can frankly understand and be able to adjust their lives accordingly. There has been a fabulous response on the part of the civil service. And I just want to say a huge thanks to the men and women across our civil service who have just worked tirelessly to make that happen.
So with that has come a great time of innovation. Technology has probably in recent times played the biggest part in our daily lives. How has innovation played its part in what we're doing today in the civil service?
Every day we're seeing new examples of ways that we can deliver public services in ways that our public is able to access, in ways that makes life a little easier for civil servants who are delivering those services, and in ways that's responding to the crisis. So we have 3 branches of government that the civil service is currently supporting. And with the executive day-to-day, I've talked about the type of activities that are happening in all of our departments. But as an example of innovation, we also had just yesterday, they started live streaming the Court of Appeal. So we had our judicial branch still providing the continuation of judicial proceedings and making sure that that is still accessible to the public. So I thought that that was a huge innovation. And my sincere appreciation and congratulations to Chief Officer Bothwell and all of the team at the judicial branch of government who've really made that happen through the court's office. We also had an unprecedented meeting yesterday of our Legislative Assembly. That was a session that went very late till 10 o'clock in the evening, but in order to ensure that the proceedings could be run safely, we had some members of Parliament that were participating remotely. Technology allowed that to happen. What also allowed that to happen was some very hardworking people in the Attorney General's chambers who provided advice and was able to advise on the legislative changes that were needed to facilitate that happening. So again, responding very quickly to ensure all 3 branches of government are able to continue to function, and civil servants are making that happen at every turn.
So what would you say to civil servants out there who, we're lucky enough to still have our jobs. Many in our society don't. Many of us are working from home under challenging times. But what would you say to them to encourage them to continue while working from home, while going through these challenging times? I mean, we're talking about almost 4,000 people here. What would you say to them to encourage them to stay home, follow the rules, don't be a part of, breaking the rules and the regulations?
I think for within the civil service, our purpose is to make lives better. And the premier, Dr. Lee, the governor, the entire NEOP team have really emphasized there is no greater contribution that any citizen can make right now than staying at home to keep Cayman safe. So we have at least half of our staff that continue to be on shelter at home along with the rest of Cayman. But even as they're doing that, they're also contributing to providing government services, albeit remotely. This was a huge shift in the way that they worked. This was a huge shift for managers in going from managing teams that assembled physically to managing remote teams and making sure that staff were still taken care of. Later today, I will be having my first full departmental meeting for our staff since we went into the coronavirus. And all of us will be participating in a Zoom call, providing updates, but also celebrating the wins that we've had within our portfolio since the crisis began. It is hugely important to understand our needs for social distancing right now and how this makes sure that the efforts that are having to be taken by people who don't have the option of staying home right now, our prison officers, our police officers, the men and women delivering medical services on the front line. The biggest contribution we can do to respect the sacrifices that they're making at this time is to stay home. And the fact that so many civil servants have managed to do that while continuing to provide government services as a back office service is tremendous. It just makes me smile. As I was coming in this morning, I got a message on my WhatsApp, and it was just a member of staff talking about the fact that they had to come in today, but how pleasant it was as they were going through a roadblock to be greeted by a member of our CDC team, which is now embedded with the police, augmenting that public service. And as they were being questioned about why they were going in, just the demeanor of this individual, and the most important thing that they offered was a smile. You shouldn't underestimate how big small gestures are at this time. So if there's anything that you could do just to send a reinforcing message to another member of your team who may be facing personal challenges at this time. We know that this is a very stressful time, and as you shelter at home and you're managing, supporting perhaps children who are going through homeschooling, perhaps you're responsible for supporting an elderly person who has to have very strict isolation protocols to keep them safe. You may be someone that has underlying medical conditions, and that makes you more anxious during this time. Or you may be someone who really has a longer day because although you're working from home, the services that you're providing are in the highest demand that they have been in recent history. I would say to individuals who are facing any of those challenges, or perhaps all of those challenges, just to continue to be strong, take care of yourself. It's really important to recognize the stresses that you might be going under and to utilize this time that you're working remotely to do things that give yourself that bit of reprieve. For me, a big part of my daily routine now has been able to go for walks in the afternoon with my husband and my son. Before the crisis, when we were all working centrally, I had at least a 2-hour commute coming to work and going back home every day. Working from home most days of the week provides me opportunity to be able to make family dinner, to be the person responsible for reading to my son before he goes to bed each evening, to hear his joke of the day, and there have been lots of jokes of the days, and even to have the opportunity to pop into his classroom. Now that he's learning from home, I have an opportunity to see what it is that he's studying in ways that I really wouldn't have been able to do before. So it's about finding those wins, even though we know that there's a lot of challenges right now. There are these beautiful moments in the midst of all of this chaos, and it's about recognizing them and giving yourself permission to enjoy those moments when they arrive.
So the civil service and civil servants have responded and continue to respond to the needs of the public on a daily basis during this crisis. What does the transition out of this look like? What are the plans for how, we've gone from, over 1,000, almost 2,000 people, particularly in this building. How are we going to get those people? Are there any plans? Well, I'm sure there are plans, but how does that look? How is that transition going to take place?
At any given time, we have our leadership team that are looking at how do we meet the needs of today while we contemplate the needs of tomorrow. So we're already looking at how would we support the government at the time that they feel that it is the right time to be moving forward with what happens next and trying to get back to not the old usual, but our new normal. What is the civil service going to be doing to facilitate that happening? And we are already developing our action plans for how those transitions might happen. I think as we talk about our new normal, it's really important for us to understand that there's some aspects of our current situation that we expect to be with us long term. And that's a good thing. What we've learned about our capacity to deliver services remotely, I think is a win that we should be able to preserve. The technology that we've been able to bring to the fore very quickly and allowing people who might not ordinarily have access to government to be able to have access. So being able to broadcast proceedings from our courts so that people who might not before been able to physically attend court can now see what's happening within our judiciary. The ability to deliver services electronically so that people do not have to come to a physical location in order to receive a government service. We've expanded the number of e-services that we're offering, and every department has had to look at the services they've offered and really ask themselves, why do we have to have this many steps involved in that? So this was an effort that had begun, but it's gotten new life in this time. And we're also talking to each other. There are some transactions that require multiple visits to government departments. And in a time when we're contemplating how anxious people can be about going into physical dwellings, we're having to ask ourselves, how can we collaborate more one department to another to make that a more streamlined process so that we can make it easier for our customers to not have to go through so many steps. So this has really given new life to the innovations that have already begun, and we've seen in our customer service goals, we've got about 2 years of progress that have happened in the past 2 months in response to the priorities the coronavirus presented.
Any final words to civil servants out there and about the civil service and to the general public about times in civil service and times that we're going through right now and how we plan to continue to deliver those services?
I would say that as a public service family, that this has been a challenging time, but also a time that we've been very deliberate about caring for our staff. We know that our ability to keep Cayman safe relies very heavily on the civil service and the wider public service showing up every day and doing what needs to be done, whether that is making sure that garbage is collected, whether that is making sure that people in need receive the proceeds that they need to be able to buy groceries and meet their basic needs, whether that is maintaining law and order. The civil service is a huge part of supporting all three branches, and most importantly, every citizen of this country. So that has been very rewarding to have a direct understanding of how it is we make lives better. That's really been crystallized for the civil service during this pandemic threat. And I would just want to say to every civil servant, whether you're on the front line or you're contributing remotely from working from home, thank you. And know that one of our top priorities is making sure that we can continue to support you and make your life better by making sure that we've contemplated the types of demands that are already being placed on you and that we're figuring out how we can make those things even easier. So we continue to make sure that payroll happens, and in the last 2 months, we've even ensured that that's happened a bit earlier because we know many of you are also supporting your wider family who may be having more difficult times as a result of of job loss or other challenges presented during this coronavirus threat. So making sure that we're supporting our teams, whether they're on the front line or working remotely, continues to be a top priority, emphasized by the Deputy Governor, and very much facilitated by ministries across the board and the very hardworking HR personnel that are embedded in those ministries, and my own team in the portfolio of the Civil Service, which they have just been amazing during this time. They're working across many different areas, contributing to the recovery and making sure that Cayman remains safe. And I just want to say to them my sincere thanks for all the hard work that you're doing.
All right. Mrs. McField-Nixon, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure that the public is now more enlightened, as are civil servants, after this interview with you. And I think that the information that they needed, thank you for that, for sharing that with us here on CIG Television. And thank you for joining us for this as well.